Hello, welcome to another episode of the Menswear Style Podcast. I'm your host, Pete Brooker. Today, I'm talking to the CEO and re-founder of Renauld sunglasses, Gareth Llewelyn. Renauld can be found over at renauld.co.uk, and let me spell that for you, Renauld. A little bit about the legacy before we bring Gareth in. The Renauld brand has a rich history rooted in the second half of the 20th century. In the early 60s, Charles Rowley, owner of the highly successful Sea and Ski Suntan company, was looking to expand his product line into complementary merchandise such as sunglasses and bathing suits. After fruitful negotiations with the Botany menswear brand, Renault's first branded collection was launched in the spring of 1961. And so there's so much to get into. And these sunglasses were worn by Elvis Presley back in the day. They featured in The Italian Job. Later you might have seen the likes of Johnny Depp wear them in The Rum Diary, and we're going to get into this now. I can't wait to bring this to you. This is Gareth Llewelyn talking about Renauld sunglasses in his own words.
My background is technology, and I had a hobby, a very bizarre hobby of collecting sunglasses, specifically the sunglasses from the Italian Job. I was looking for them for about 10 years, and in doing that, I collected a vast amount of sunglasses from a particular brand called Renauld. And Renauld disappeared. They were very, very big Renauld brand in the 60s, from 1961 to 1981, and then just disappeared. And a lot of their bits and pieces were sold to Foster Grants, who some of you might know. And so when I was collecting all these sunglasses, I eventually found the Italian Job ones and decided to remake them. And in doing that, I thought, right, well, I'll just buy the residual trademark and brand for Renauld. And so I ended up buying the entire rights to Renauld globally and restarting the company. Very odd way of doing something like this. And since then, we've had just stratospheric success. But we did take a big liberty. Renauld was a very low brow brand back in the 60s. It was, you could buy a pair of Renaulds for $15 or $22 for the Mustangs, which today is about $100. But we decided we wanted to make the Rolex of sunglasses with Renauld, and we wanted to go to the top level. And so, we relaunched them, but obviously this time they were at a completely different level of quality, made by artisans, handmade in Italy, and often plated in 24 karat gold plate or palladium. So that sort of brings us up to date, really.
And making of the sunglasses was not as easy as perhaps you might have just made it sound then. I know that you took the designs and some of the originals around to some factories in the UK and no one can do it. So maybe just explore on that a little bit, please.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Italian Job sunglasses are very, very odd in as much as they bend on 3 axes. And so you need a 5-axis milling machine, which some of you might know, to actually make them. They're very, very difficult to make and make them well and make them sit correctly. So we went to 3 companies in the UK, some very big companies as well. But of course, they weren't used to doing sunglasses. And we ended up with going to Italy. I'd spoken to a couple of people in Italy, and they just shook their heads in total despair and said, we don't make this stuff anymore, it's too difficult. And I was sort of thinking that we couldn't do it, actually. I actually, after about 9 months of trying, I thought we weren't going to be able to do it. And in the end, we ended up finding a company who was so handmade that each one of them was pretty much put together by hand. And so we made 150 of them, which took forever. I mean, through COVID, it took about 7 months to make these 150. And then they were all sold like within about, honestly, I've never seen something sell so fast in my life, really. It was probably sold, they were all taken for at least inside 3 weeks. And so I had to make another 33 to fulfill the orders that we'd taken that we couldn't fulfill. We're just at the end of that run now, and we've used the same people right the way through. So all of the range of Renault now are made by that factory, and they've suddenly had a huge uplift from us, actually, because through COVID, it was very difficult for them. And so we kept them going, actually.
Interesting. And I remember you telling me about how owning a brand is actually different to owning a name. So when you went around and you got the trademarks from different countries and the patents, I mean, it was a long process for you, but actually owning a name to the brand is completely different than owning the brand itself. Can you just tap upon that a little?
Yeah, well, I think it's something that I learned very, very early on. I mean, I'd been in patents and trademarking previously, so I knew quite a lot about it. But I didn't know that when you buy a trademark, you don't own a brand. You own the name, and the brand is something so esoteric that it's grown over a very long period of time. Like Hermes or Rolex or any of those people own that name, but the brand underneath it and what it stands for takes years and years and years of building upon layer upon layer upon layer. And so what we had was a very interesting dilemma. We had a huge amount of heritage. We've got Elvis wearing them and really liking them. We've got Jackie Onassis, actual film of Jackie Onassis now, which has resurfaced very recently, of her wearing them in 1962, has had, so many views on Instagram. It's crazy. Because we've got so many people from the 60s who used them, we were able to use that in our branding and bring the branding up. And the most recent one that we're chatting about today with Jim Clark came about, which was just quite extraordinary, really, how that came about. But the thing, people keep coming out of the woodwork. I mean, honestly, this is 3 years, we're in our third year in, and people still arrive. Like yesterday, I was given an advert. Somebody bought a pair of glasses. I'm going to tell this story because I think it's really interesting how this works. This guy, he runs a BMW performance garage in Massachusetts. And he contacted me and said, are you still making the bikinis? All right. And I said, yeah, we are making the bikinis.
That's a model on the website.
Yeah. And he said to me that we were looking through Car and Racing, or whatever it's called. I can't remember exactly what Car and Motoring or something, from 1963. And there was an advert in there with a lady wearing a pair of bikinis and a bloke in a car. And I said, oh yeah. And he said, well, my wife really likes them. Can we buy them? And so, yeah, of course. So he came on the website, he bought them, and then he sent me an email and he said, I can't believe an advert from 1958, from 58 years ago, has still resulted in a sale today. And I also, I mean, I gave it to my team. I sent this advert, which we've never seen. We have never seen this advert ever around. And it's a great picture of a lady in a sports car with the bikinis on, And I just thought it was extraordinary that I think for the next 10 years, we're still going to see pictures of people wearing them that we never knew wore them,
I mean, before you launched the brand, you were a bit of a fanatic about Renauld sunglasses. Yeah. Anyway, you owned up to about 180 pairs, I want to say, something like that.
Yeah.
So you already had, a huge archive of research before the brand was launched. So it must be an incredible bonus, and equally as exciting for you when you do see a new photo, not just because it kind of equates to sales, but because of your passion for it.
Yeah, I mean the weird thing about this, and it is unfortunate, I'm sorry to say, that we haven't got this on a video, because I could actually show you this. But he sent me the Car and Driver, that's what it was, Car and Driver magazine front, and on it is Jim Clark in a Lotus. All right. I mean, you couldn't make that up, could you? There's Jim Clark in a Lotus Type 25, which is obviously what we're doing at the moment. And then there's this black and white advert in a Porsche, very early 911. It's not a 911, it's a 356, I think, convertible. And just an extraordinary thing. I never cease. I thought I'd seen everything. And as I said, things keep coming up. And the worst thing is, people keep emailing me and saying, there was a guy from California emailed me and said, and this was quite early in the morning. He was watching Sweet Charity, which was a film from '69. And he said, I think your sunglasses are in this. And I thought, what? 8 hours difference, and so I got the film and I watched it, and sure enough, at the beginning of the film, the villain's got our sunglasses on, and it's just weird, just completely weird.
I know when we last spoke, we had Renauld on saying that the glasses are in the Rum Diary as well with Johnny Depp. I think 61s are they in there? Yeah, so they, I think hopefully it's just going to be, a deep pocket of tricks and treasures that can be unearthed and uncovered for you when they come out. You mentioned there that you had like something to show. We'll try and put everything we can on the show notes over at Menswear Style, which will accompany the podcast. Okay. So people can go over there and take a look at these. And you also mentioned Jim Clark. So let's talk about the new collaboration that you have going with Jim Clark. These are a new version of the 61s. Can you talk about the new launch, please?
Yes, very, very interesting project. And again, my experience with this brand has been to talk to a lot of my heroes. I really revered Susan George from around the late 60s, early 70s. She had a very big career, and we did a photo shoot with her, and I got to meet her and got to know her as well. And it's an incredible journey for me, because I'm able to meet the people who actually formed a lot of my youth, to tell you the truth. And what happened was, we had found some pictures of Sir John Whitmore wearing our sunglasses in the 60s, and we put them on, I think we put them in Octane. And I was contacted by Peter Darley. Now, Peter Darley is a very famous photographer from the 60s. He's into his 80s now, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. But he was the official Lotus photographer in the 60s. So he took pictures of Colin Chapman and all of the Lotuses in the pit lane throughout the 60s. And so his archive is just second to none. And he said to me straight away, I think there's, pictures of Jim Clark around with these sunglasses on. He didn't have any. And fortuitously, at the same time, I was contacted by a person writing a book on Jim Clark, who said, again, with this classic picture they sent on an email, are these Renauld sunglasses that Jim's wearing, you see? And I said, yes, they are. And we examined it very closely. And then within about a week, we had another 5 pictures of Jim Clark wearing these sunglasses.
Wow.
In the car, actually in the car. So, I mean, this was like fantastic forensic work. And so Peter said, well, I know Clive Chapman, who's Colin Chapman's son. And do you want me to introduce me to you, so that we could possibly look at remaking them? And the original 61s that we've got on the website are 41 millimeters deep, and they were the original ones. They're the Elvis ones. They're the Jackie Onassis ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we wanted to do was, when we looked at the ones that Jim was wearing, there was a slightly different model. And they made all sorts of different models. They made 15 million of them in the 60s. So there was a lot of different depths. And Jim's were 45 millimeters. So we rejigged the lens cutting, and then we produced the first prototypes. And in the meantime, Clive had then said, Well, Jim really had two cars that he did most of his winning in. Was the Type 25, in which he won the 1963 and the 1965 World Championships, and then the Type 38, which he won the Indianapolis 500 in. And he's the only person to date to have won both the World Championship Formula One and the Indianapolis 500 in the same year, which was 1965. Wow. So I thought, I like this. I like this type of detail. So we decided we were going to make 25 Type 25s in gold and 38 Type 38s in palladium.
Nice.
And obviously, sorry to interrupt, but it's very important that I say that Clive then introduced me to the Jim Clark Trust, and they have been very, very, very inspirational here, because they've effectively given me access to the signature, and a lot of information about Jim. So when we look at the Jim Clark 61, we've got everything on it. We've got the classic Team Lotus logo. We've got his signature on it. We've got the type of the car that's on it, right down to the color of the inside of the car on the inside of the.
I love that.
And again, this is annoying. You can't see.
No, I'll describe it. For the
on
people
the inside of the covers.
On the cases for the glasses, you've got a yellow and a red. But inside the case is on a beautiful green case there that's got like a gold.
And there's a picture of the winning car.
Oh yeah, and a kind of embossed car. And so we'll have to put these on the show notes because they're gorgeous. But yeah, so that's the attention of detail that you're going into for these.
Yeah.
So, Gareth, would you say that the main audience for Renauld would either be people that love cars, people that love movies, people that love Elvis? Are you noticing there's is it a mishmash or all three, but in one in particular, is there one ahead of the others?
Yeah, definitely. At the moment, it's racing, motor racing, that sort of thing. The other two collaborations that we're doing in very, very short are not with racing cars, but they're around other aspects of, can I say, motoring. The two very big untouched ones at the moment that we are looking to touch with the 71, which is another product that came out in 1971, are very much more to do with the music industry, to do with the film industry. There's a lot going on over there. It just hasn't come together as fast as cars. Cars are, when you've got a picture of Jim Clark wearing it, and so obviously in his car, it's like, this is a bit of a no-brainer, this one. Yeah. Whereas anything to do with Elvis takes an enormous amount of time to sort out rights and, whether we can do that or not. I mean, just look at Purcell and Steve McQueen. I mean, that's been going on since the Thomas Crown affair, but it costs an enormous amount of money to use his image for Purcell. Yeah. And so we need to be very careful with a fledgling brand that we use our heritage first. Right. That's what we're doing.
And how do you use the heritage first versus any conflicts with, I know we've touched upon this before, but just to clarify, so you could use your heritage first, maybe with a picture of Elvis wearing the sunglasses and put that on the website, or no?
Well, this is a very touchy-feely area. Without question, everything to do with the 61 for Jim Clark is all licensed. All right. So I have to license all sorts of things from people, the pictures, the signature, the name, the Lotus, sort of classic Team Lotus logos. All of this was sorted out over 3 or 4 months ago before we even start to produce something. And with Elvis, because we're not using Elvis to promote our sunglasses per se, we have got Elvis wearing a pair of Renaulds in the 60s. we're okay as long as we don't move too far into putting it in a shop window where Elvis is wearing it and then I put Renauld underneath. You can't do that without going to the estate of Elvis and saying, but we own the pictures of Elvis wearing the sunglasses. I bought the rights to those.
Right.
But that's not the same as owning or talking to the estate to be able to use Elvis as to promote your sunglasses. That we don't do.
And I've got personal experience with dealing with other people's intellectual property, and I won't go too much into that, but I can tell you that it's much better to have a very upfront, civilized conversation with the people that are willing to listen in the estates or the people that own it than there is to just go in like a bull in a china shop and just go, here's my product, here's the picture, let's just sell as much as we can and get the hell out of here. It's much better from the start to kind of lay a bit of a ground, and just see what is possible and what is not. And we mentioned Elvis. Gareth, can you talk about the Elvis film that's coming up, and was there anything that you had involved with this one?
Well, yes. We were contacted probably 2.5 years ago now, before I'd actually launched Renauld. A guy who supplies all the sunglasses to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and a lot of the Rumdaris sunglasses. It all comes from a place called Old Focals in Pasadena. Very, very, very amazing shop. If anyone's ever there, go and see it, because it is the most extraordinary experience I've ever had. As a sunglasses fetish man, it is the mecca in the world. He has been collecting sunglasses what seems like all his life, because when you go into his little shop, which is very incongruous, it's set back from the road, it's a little shop, and you go in there and it's like every old pair of sunglasses you can think of around the wall, with pictures like the Rolling Stones there, and then there's Brad Pitt's there, and I mean every single person has been in this shop to get some sunglasses.
Wow, that's
right?
amazing.
And out the back are 3 shipping containers, like the ones you see, on the docks, and in there it's full of sunglasses.
Wow.
All right. So this guy couldn't. He and I built up a relationship very quickly, but he didn't have the Renauld sunglasses that Elvis wore, and I had 6 pair of them. Actually, I'd cornered the market in that exact pair of sunglasses. And he said to Warner Brothers approached him and said, "Look, have you got any?" And he said, "No, but I know a man who has," and that's how they approached me. And so I did a deal with them down in Australia where they were filming it, and I sold them pairs of sunglasses. And that was the last I heard of it until Tom Hanks got COVID. I think he was one of the first people to get COVID.
I remember.
January 2020. And it stopped filming, and then I thought, oh, well, this is never going to get made. And eventually it was finished, I think, at the end of 2020. Then they said, oh, yeah, we'll postpone it now until June 2022. And as we were mentioning before this, you never ever know whether they're going to make it into the final edit.
Right.
You never know. And so we hope they do, but we don't know. And if they do, obviously it's somewhat quite large endorsement for Renauld. But they wouldn't give me a credit. They wouldn't give me a credit Renauld sunglasses on it. Because
you
they
asked?
Yeah, I did ask.
Yeah.
And it was basically because we hadn't produced the 61 at that point. We weren't providing our own sunglasses.
Right.
We were providing sunglasses from 1963, 64, which were my own personal collection. And consequently, they weren't prepared. We weren't a big enough brand for them to put it on the credit, but bottom line.
Yeah. I know.
But we are now.
Yeah, maybe you can pick up the phone to him again and go, have you checked the website out recently? Yeah. Are there any archived ones in a museum of anywhere of the original ones that Elvis wore, the original 61s?
So, this is a very interesting story, and it's a story of the rise of the celebrity-owned ephemera. Basically, it's in 2016. I think it was 2016. The original sunglasses that he handed to his security guard because he'd fed up. He didn't want to wear them anymore, and he'd worn them for about 5 months, I think, at that point. Were sold for $11,000 at an auction in LA. They came up again, I think last year or the year. The last year it was, and they sold. Well, they got to 41,000, and I was very suspicious. I didn't think they were the same pair. I mean, they had the letter of authenticity that it came from the security guard, but I started to think, I'm not sure about this, actually, looking at them very closely. And
you're looking at photos of these?
Yeah, I didn't actually see them.
Okay.
And they are being pushed around now. I think there may be 2 pair. I don't think there's one. You can't see them anywhere. Once people buy them, they put them in a case at home, and then that's it. They're gone. We have had discussions. My sister, who's in the business, has had discussions with the V&A about doing a Renauld display collection, because we've got enough, shall we say, here.
Oh, please.
To show the evolution of the 61 throughout the 60s and who wore them and pictures of them wearing. So, I would really like to do that, because I think people need to see it. I think they need to see the incredible design that was going on in the early 60s. I mean, it was a time of incredible creativity in shapes, just enormous shapes around people's faces. I mean, today it's just great slabs of, if you see Selling Sunset, or you see any of these sort of brand-related, series, everyone's wearing very predictable stuff. Yeah. It's very predictable.
Yeah. Well, there's no Rolex of sunglasses going around on Home and Away that I've noticed, anyway.
No.
I don't know where that came from. I've not seen that show in 15 years. There might be. Sorry, I'm doing Home and Away disservice. Gareth, it's been wonderful talking to you again. I could listen to you talk about sunglasses and your passion for it, specifically Renault sunglasses, for hours, but I appreciate you've got a life to get on with and a weekend to handle. Renauld.co.uk is the place people can go, and again, we'll put all the links over on the show notes. What social media do you like to hang out on these days?
Well, we're not very good at social media, I'll be honest. What we do a lot, probably more of than anything else, is Instagram. It's Renault sunglasses there. But the thing is that I like to put up, people putting it up, sort of wearing the sunglasses from the past on there. And that you can go and see Jackie Onassis looking very stunning there. Which had an enormous amount of views. Couldn't believe the number of views that video wrapped up. But yeah, so it's Instagram really that we're on.
Awesome. Well, in the meantime, Gareth, look forward to having you back on, hopefully, to talk about the new projects that will be out next year as well, and maybe have you back on to talk about the Elvis film, because I'll be very intrigued to see how that turns out. But Gareth Llewelyn there, re-founder and CEO of Renault Sunglasses. You've been listening to the Menswear Style podcast. Be sure to head over to menswearstyle.co.uk for more menswear content, and email info@menswearstyle.co.uk if you would like to be a future guest on the show. Finally, please help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Until next time.